Hi, my name is Dr. Eric Robinson from the Department of Psychological Sciences, Institute of Psychology, Health and Society. As part of my enrollment on EdD 311, today I am going to be talking to you about student learning and research-led teaching. As an undergraduate at the University of Liverpool and now a member of teaching staff, I have had the opportunity to experience research-led teaching as both a student and a teacher, and I hope that today's talk will be of interest. So let's start with today's objectives. There are 4 key session objectives that I want to cover today. The first objective is to discuss what research-led teaching is and what it means to me personally. The second objective is to understand the rationale behind this approach. Why does research-led teaching work? The third objective is to provide some examples of how I have been able to use research-led teaching in my own practice. Finally, I will discuss how research-led teaching has shaped the design of a module I currently teach on. Research-led teaching is an approach that is becoming increasingly valued in higher education settings, and it is the type of term that we hear very regularly. But what does it mean and what constitutes research-led teaching? Very loosely, we can think of research-led teaching as an approach to teaching and curriculum design that is led by research. Healy suggests that at the core of research-led teaching is the notion that course content reflects the research interests of the teacher. Zamorsky elaborates on this point, but makes an important distinction. Research-led teaching constitutes a wider process because it constitutes any teaching practice that is shaped by the teacher's research and the research of others. This got me thinking about research-led teaching, and I informally surveyed some of the more experienced colleagues in my institute. A common theme in their thoughts was that the best type of research-led teaching is when a student learns through the process of conducting research themselves. This is a notion that rings true for me too. Research-led teaching to me involves using the research process as a learning experience for students. To understand how a concept works, it can be beneficial to study the concept directly and gain hands-on knowledge of it. I believe this helps students move beyond a superficial level of understanding. One of the reasons that this happens is because it makes the learning process interactive and moves learning from the lecture theatre to the laboratory. The student needs to challenge, probe and interact with the very topic or subject matter they are learning. Moreover, it allows the learning process to be collaborative in terms of the student and teacher relationship. In research, lots of decisions need to be made and good research teams do this together. Thus, when the student is involved in this decision-making process, the learning process becomes collaborative. Sometimes the teacher ends up learning new things from the student too. The end result of this process is excellent science. We conduct research for a reason, and that reason is the acquisition of knowledge. By valuing research-led teaching, this not only benefits the student's learning experience, but benefits the wider scientific community and our knowledge base. Before I move on to what the theory and benefits behind research-led teaching are, I should also flag up that my interpretation and emphasis about research-led teaching is only part of a wider picture. The interplay between teaching and research can involve other things aside from making sure that the student plays an active role in conducting research. This is what we would describe as teaching be research-based. However, according to research teaching nexus models, teaching can be research-led in other ways. For example, teaching processes can simply be research-informed, and by this I mean designing teaching practices or classes based on pedagogical research. Other examples include teaching being research-orientated, which involves teaching students about the process of research itself, rather than using research as a means to teach. There are likely to be a number of benefits to research-led teaching for both the student and the teacher. We will first cover how the student can benefit, then later discuss how the teacher can benefit. One of the reasons that research-led teaching can be beneficial to the student is because if done correctly, research-led teaching can constitute a very good example of experiential learning. Experiential learning is when a student can directly experience the topic they are learning, reflect and understand the insights they have picked up, and then implement these learnings in a meaningful way. Research-led teaching allows this process to happen naturally, as research itself is a process of development, critical analysis and evaluation. As I alluded to earlier, research-led teaching promotes discourse between the student and teacher. By doing so, there are likely to be indirect benefits too, many of which we might not think of immediately. For example, rich discourse allows a teacher to get a better understanding of a student's needs, and this itself is important to the level a teacher pitches at. Perhaps most importantly, research-led teaching is often an active process. Contemporary learning theories suggest that information is retained and understood better when it is processed deeply, and active engagement with a topic allows this. I think the key theme that is covered in this slide is engagement. Students should be engaged with their course content, and alongside the benefits to learning outlined here, in my experience, student engagement often translates into student satisfaction. I currently do a lot of teaching on Psych 123. This is a module for first-year psychology students. A substantial number of psychology students will not have studied psychology at a level. One of the first teaching activities involves encouraging students to conduct literature searches on a research topic that is of mutual interest to the tutor group. That way the students shape the type of research they are learning about. On Psych 123 I have been able to practice research-led teaching by having students reflect on their personal experiences as research participants in order to understand key concepts relating to research ethics. Students complete a presentation and are asked to consider how their own personal experiences as a research participant have helped them to understand why ethics are an important part of the research process. This constitutes a form of experiential learning. Another example of how I have used research-led teaching in this module is by using research to highlight the basic of reasoning and how to evaluate an evidence base. I have done this by having students study research papers which make flaws in their reasoning or provide conclusions which do not directly relate to the evidence amassed. So in this process, research becomes a vehicle by which to introduce some of these reasoning concepts. I also set an essay topic, and typically this essay centers around one of my main research interests. This results in my research interests to directly shape my students' learning. The added benefit of setting an essay topic around my area of expertise is that I feel more comfortable engaging with the students and can give them more detailed feedback in response to their questions and ideas. This is because it is more than likely I will have thought about those same questions too. Psych 340 also provides excellent opportunities to conduct research-led teaching. This is because the module itself involves final year students becoming researchers for a module, and typically I supervise students in an area of my expertise. As I will now discuss, the main content and unit of assessment have been designed to be research-led, and teaching on this module has given me a very good experience of research-led teaching. The entire module captures how research-led teaching works. By actively conducting research, the students I teach develop a deeper and more nuanced understanding of the key concepts being introduced, such as experimental design and data collection methods. Finally, when the students are ready to write their scientific report, which constitutes the main unit of assessment for the module, they write this report on the piece of research they have designed and conducted. Thus, the module's design is research-orientated, research-inspired and research-based. Psych 310 is another good example of a module which has been actively shaped by research-led teaching considerations. Psych 310 is a third-year optional module which focuses on key concepts in appetite and obesity. Each week a different staff member lectures on a new concept. The course content is research-led because each staff member lectures on their own area of expertise. The content of the lectures is strongly driven by the academics' recent published research, as well as other research which they are particularly interested in. So each lecture can be classed as being research-inspired. This concept is also made very clear to students before the course, and our student feedback regularly mentions how this is a positive aspect of the course. Students feel as though they are being taught by the expert. The module content has been shaped by research-led teaching through interactive material in lectures. For example, I have introduced interactive experiments in lectures. At key points in the course, students will be required to understand landmark studies. To illustrate these studies, we have students take part in the experiment as a participant. This process allows the student to become part of the research. Research-led teaching has shaped the module design as one of the units of assessment. Students are encouraged to select a research paper of interest and then critically appraise. This unit of assessment involves the group then preparing and delivering a presentation to the rest of the module. One of the module's objectives is to teach students to critically assess evidence, so we use this research-inspired approach to achieve this objective. As is often the case with research-led teaching, it provides students with a concrete example by which to explore core concepts. Earlier in the talk I discussed why teaching with research can be beneficial for the teacher too. In my experience, one of the benefits of research-led teaching is that it allows an academic to teach about a topic they have passion for. The other benefit is that teaching about a topic that one is knowledgeable about means that discourse with students comes easier. At times it can be a challenge to naturally connect with students. They are often of a different generation and at times have rather different interests, but a shared research idea and motivation can cut across these differences. I enjoy research-led teaching because I have a greater sense of mastery with this type of teaching. Knowing a topic inside out means that I can focus on the student's level of understanding more and spend less time trying to get my head around course content. Concepts like mastery and enjoyment are of course key factors which can contribute to job satisfaction. And here are references to some of the resources that I have discussed today. Thank you for your attention.